And so
hate watching.
Well, that's another thing. When you were talking about earlier that people feel, people enjoy even feeling negative emotions in a sense, or even, and then we talked about that with hate watching. It's kind of the same thing.
Hello, and welcome to the Cup of Tea Critiques podcast. I'm your host, Brandon Chasen, and like always, I'll be joined today by the team that brings you cupofteacritiques.com. Here, we'll dive deep into the productions and topics we broach on our website, so you can decide for yourself if they're your cup of tea. Ready for a deep look with a deep brew? This week's topic, why do we like to be scared? Cup of Tea Critiques is a family affair, and I'm here with my brother Chris, my mother Reva, and my father Terry.
When people think Halloween, they think horror. And so I don't think it's necessarily problematic to want to understand the appeal of horror films. Why is it that people like to be scared? And half of our group loves horror. This is an opportune time to kind of center horror in our talk, given, Halloween is approaching. And so I thought this would be a good time to kind of dig into this idea of not horror so much, but what is it people find appealing about horror and horror movies? Why is it that people want to be scared? To me, that's a strange thing. I think back to when I was a kid. I celebrated Halloween as well, but I don't ever recall wearing a scary outfit. And I wonder if that was kind of an early sign of my kind of wanting to enjoy the holiday without being scared. Why is it that people want to be scared? And so I found several articles that spoke to that, and I was very surprised, pleasantly surprised to see research. Some very nice research has been done on this. The one piece of research, anyway, is entitled "Why Do We Enjoy Horror?" And it was written by Hai-Yang Yang at Johns Hopkins and his colleague Kwang-Ji Zhang, who is actually at Nanyang University in Singapore. And central to their research is the question, why do we like to be scared? And they distilled it down to three things. The first was stimulation. People like to be stimulated. So just as things excite us and give us joy, we also want to be stimulated with respect to fear and anxiety. Now, I'm not feeling that, but some people do, is their point. The interesting thing I thought they said was that we tend to feel the most positive emotions when something makes us feel the most negative emotions. And so while we're, sitting in the theater, perhaps watching a horror film, there's something about that experience that when it's over, heightens our positive emotions. That if we're taken to the worst place emotionally, when that experience is over, we're naturally moved to a more positive place. So I thought that was very interesting. The second reason we like to be scared is to live out alternative realities. So going through a haunted house, for example, imagining the apocalypse. We've seen plenty of movies about various forms of the apocalypse. I even think about movies where people are actually in space. So we want to live out these alternative realities. And then the third is we want to satisfy our curiosity about the dark side of the human psyche. Now, you guys have heard me talk quite a bit about the fact that I am not a fan of horror. And so I'll admit that some of these things I can't get with. I can't get with the idea of needing, your curiosity satisfied regarding the dark side of the human psyche. So that is something that really frightens me. I remember Terry talking in one of our other podcasts. You talked about Nightmare on Elm Street and how the idea of someone invading your dreams is something that you really like. You thought that was a very original idea and you loved that film for that reason. And that's just something I couldn't get with. Even the film Jaws, for example, I was scared for weeks And that wasn't even a horror movie. It was horrifying, but I would not call that a horror movie. But nonetheless, this is what the researchers found. Stimulation, living out alternative realities, and then satisfying curiosity about the dark side of the human psyche. Now, how is it that people who like being scared are able to get through that experience? And they said they have what they call a protective frame. And there are three parts to that frame. The first is three elements to that frame, I should say. The first is they know that they're safe. So when they're watching a horror film, for example, horrible things going on in there, they know that they're safe. They're physically distant from that which is going on. So in their words, nothing's going to come out of the screen. Here's the thing. We did see someone come out of the screen, but we saw someone come out of the screen on the screen, though, to be fair.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one. The other is what they call detachment, in that they know it's not real. So they've compartmentalized this in their heads. They know these are just actors acting out the story on screen. This is not real. And then the third element is they know they can manage the dangers that they encounter. In other words, they don't feel vulnerable. They, for example, in real life, if they encountered something horrible that's similar perhaps to something that they are seeing on screen, they know they can run. They can get away. So they feel secure. And so those are the three protective frames that people who watch these films tend to have. Now, they did say they don't necessarily have to have all three. Maybe they have just two. I don't know if they can have only one and be able to watch these films.
Yeah, I didn't agree with any of those.
And then lastly, just to finish summarizing this, what I thought was quite interesting is they looked at data that was collected over a 10-year period from 82 countries. And what they found is that people in the wealthiest countries tend to watch scary movies, much more so than people in. That suggests the third element of the protective frame is missing for people in poor countries. So you think about this. In poor countries, you don't feel as secure. You don't have as much to insulate yourself, to secure yourself and your family. And so you feel vulnerable. They said that helps to explain why we see many fewer people in poor countries watching scary movies. And so I found it very interesting that there was an economic component to watching scary films. I just wanted to put that piece of research out there that I think did an excellent job of kind of laying the groundwork for our talk today.
Okay, two things. Jaws is a horror movie. It is even considered in all of its descriptions. It is a horror movie. And two, as I said before, I didn't agree with any of those things that they talked about in terms of protective frames. Because to me, a good horror movie is something that it sucks you into it and you actually feel like you're in it. You are in it. So seeing that person come out of the screen, everybody in the theater went, whoa! So, yeah, I didn't feel like, oh, that couldn't happen to me.
Could that film be the exception, though, The Ring, where she crawled out of the screen?
It is one movie with that type of thing that had that effect. To me, that type of effect is something that makes a horror movie a good horror movie. So, yeah, you mentioned probably my all-time favorite being A Nightmare on Elm Street. I do have a couple of others, which is A Cabin in the Woods, because, again, it was one of those that had a different bent on horror. And again, I know I mentioned this when we were doing the horror podcast. Those are the types of movies that pull me in. And then last and not least, you could call it a horror short, was Thriller. And Thriller was very entertaining, but it was a nice horror short.
Well, to be fair, I wouldn't call that necessarily a horror movie. I wouldn't call that an authentic horror movie. We knew Michael was going to be doing a serious dance, even though we hadn't seen it yet. Michael's about to jam to his jam. So that's not a horror movie.
Just because the ghouls had rhythm, you know.
Yeah, I'm kind of with Dad on the. Well, I guess I'm a little. I'm curious about that research, I guess, because I just feel like there are so many factors as to why anybody could like or not like something, or and the conclusion of feeling vulnerable economically leading you to not watch horror movies. I think, was that something voiced by any of those particular people? It just seems like it could have been. A lot of horror movies don't get super wide releases, so they could just have less exposure to them. They could just, I mean, if you're economically vulnerable, maybe you are not going to the movies as much.
Right.
So it's just, there could be other factors to that. And so I guess I'm a little, it feels presumptuous. I mean, I'm not just questioning research for the sake of questioning research, but I'm curious if they kind of account for the other factors that could lead somebody who's economically vulnerable to not consume as much horror content. I think, as far as why people like to be scared, I think people like to have an experience, even when they're just going to the movie, they want to have an experience. And I feel like for me, one thing that I think about is that, like, there's very little chance that I'm not going to feel scared in a moment of a horror movie, even if it's not a great horror movie. And so I think, to me, I feel like I'm going to get something out of it, I guess. There are times when I go to see comedies where if they don't get me in the first 20, 30 minutes, by the time they do something funny, I'm out on the movie, I'm now biased against the movie and watching it and almost actively not laughing at it, you know? And so
hate watching.
Well, that's another thing. When you were talking about earlier that people enjoy even feeling negative emotions in a sense, or even and then we talked about that with hate watching. It's kind of the same thing.
Good point. Good point.
No, but yeah, I think that, so that's, for me, it's like when I'm going to see a scary movie, I'm probably going to be scared at some point in the movie, even if it's overall not the best movie. And also, I think some people just have, I think a lot of people enjoy some particular genre or some particular, the sport they choose or whatever. It can be based on a fond memory. I think, the teams we root for, the movies, we can kind of harken back to our first exposure to them. It could have been, a really good date. It could have been quality time with your family. It could have been, whatever the case may be, just like some great story you have behind it. And that can kind of that can stick in your mind and can influence your choices for entertainment for years to come. So it could also just be a fond memory, that where they first encountered scary movies and they've taken that with them.
I found the scientific research interesting because when we first read the topic, anyways, I wasn't thinking of it much as a science thought. It was more of a personal take, and that is that growing up, I always thought when Halloween came around, that's scary movie season, and so I just equated every scary movie with Halloween. But as I've gotten older, I feel like they have started trying to incorporate a second season around Valentine's Day where we get a second round of a bunch of scary movies. And now I also, because I've matured in life, sort of, there is a separation between what is a Halloween scary movie and what is just a general scary movie. There's now that seasonality to it. So I was impressed by the explanation as to why people want to see scary movies during this, in general. But I view horror movies and Halloween horror movies as different. And what I mean by that is now I view Halloween horror movies as having more of a somewhat of a supernatural appeal to it. If you think about Halloween as, we think about the Salem witches, witchcraft, and all that kind of stuff. We will think about vampires a little bit more this time of year, werewolves. And so when I think about a horror movie for Halloween, as we approach the holiday, I feel I'm looking more for that supernatural type of production. I've just finished watching Mayfair Witches, the second season of that. But I enjoyed the show, but I definitely felt a different appeal to it because it's getting close to Halloween, and that's why we kind of picked it up and ended up watching the whole season just now.
If you're going to do it in your own house where you are most powerful. No. What are you saying? We'll lose him. Sister, it's for the good of the family. I don't give a shit about the family. It's on her of innocence. She's mind reading. Who's mind? Drink the draft of the favorite children of
There was
God.
also Agatha All Along, which was the Marvel witchy one that came out last year. There's the movies, The Good Witch, Halloween Town. I feel like as we get closer to Halloween, I'm looking at more of either something that's equating Halloween directly or has that supernatural feel, and that's when I feel like I'm in season.
Well, like we said earlier, I mean, we're generally talking about horror movies, and it just happens to be against the backdrop of Halloween. So, but I find it interesting that you see a seasonality to horror movies, and you associate the supernatural element of horror movies with Halloween versus those that are released in other seasons. So I find that very interesting. Chris, to your point, the data regarding people in poorer countries watching less horror is quantitative data. They did not engage people. There was no qualitative research done here. So to your point, there are other explanations for why those movie watching numbers are lower for that group. Movie watching overall is probably lower for that group, for sure, because they simply don't have the resources, and chances are films are not distributed to a lot of those poor countries even. I hear what you all are saying, that there are a number of reasons why horror appeals to people that are not included in their explanation of why we like to be scared. But I wonder if there's some truth about essentially what's underlying that appeal of horror movies. Well, that you do want to experience fear and anxiety. You want to experience that stress. You do, don't want to believe that you want to satisfy your curiosity about the dark side of humanity. I hope none of you all do, because I hope that's not the case. So that one seems pretty.
I understand that in terms of if you're going to frame it the way they did, they're talking about protective frames, that if you feel it's safe to venture into that, but it's you maybe not necessarily are conscious of it, but you realize that it's unreal. Yeah, I can understand stretching your mind, yourself into those things and going, okay, that was really creepy. That was really dark. Hope that never happens in real life. So yeah, I think people that like horror, again, they like it for a number of reasons. One of them might be the fact that it stretches you in that way. I do think I wanted to comment on what you said earlier about shopping for Halloween costumes and whatnot. And there are a lot of people that just get geared up for Halloween. It's like their favorite holiday. I mean, they are really juiced to do it. It'll also be interesting to know whether or not they like it for the scary element or they like the dress-up part of it.
I think it's the vast majority, I would say, is the dressing up part of it.
Yeah.
But, I mean, obviously people, it's an individual thing, I'm sure. I think as an adult, I feel like I haven't taken to Halloween the same way I probably did as a kid. I think as a kid, it just felt like a good break from the routine, or as much as anything. There's a chance to dress up, a chance to go out, a chance to get candy and have it be in the spirit of a holiday and stuff like that. But it hasn't. I haven't been as enthused, I think, as a lot of my other adult friends have. But yeah, I almost never associate the horror theme with it, because I just don't. I think in general, when you're out and mingling among people, you're just socializing. You're not trying to scare people or be scared. So I that's why I said I think it's heavily on the dressing up part.
Yeah, I think a huge part of the dressing up is just about escapism, just getting outside of yourself. I think, for example, about Brandon, I remember one of your football games when you were younger, maybe about 11 or 12 years old, and you played with white makeup on your face, and you had an incredible game. I mean, you really had a great game. And, I mean, you were just, it was like you were playing outside of yourself. Yeah, so anyway, I think, I do think that is why people do it, just to be something different, to be outside of themselves for a little bit.
That's precisely where I think the parallel is with the season and the research that you just talked about. I mean, in the Halloween season, everybody they're looking forward to dressing up and that escapism from the mundane and the monotony of what our regular routine is. And I think that's similar to why people are going to see horror movies during this time, is that similar escapism as the research stated. And you talked about, that part of the brain being stimulated. I do believe that what you're talking about with costumes and makeup and all that stuff compared to the regular routine, I think that's the same reason why people want to go check out horror movies at this time, because those other genres are available all the time, whereas this time they get pushed to the front, and it's a chance for them to escape into that different part of their psyche. And I think that's where a lot of people end up checking them out more during this time of year.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of truth to that. When I was in college, my sister would every Halloween, she liked this kind of stuff. She liked the macabre, and every Halloween she would have a fish fry at her house and show one or two scary movies. And so the entire family would come. I would bring you as well. The entire family would come, and we watched movies like, The Hills Have Eyes, which is the creepiest movie I've ever seen in my life.
What the hell is this?
That's just some stuff that
And I'm trying to think of some others. Obviously, Nightmare on Elm Street was another one. And When a Stranger Calls. And if I wasn't there with my whole family, and so when I say my whole family, I mean there might have been, about 15 people there, I would have been scared to death.
Leave me alone! Jill, this is Sergeant Sacker. Listen to me. We've traced the call. It's coming from inside the house. Our squad car's going over there right now. Just get out of that house.
But anyway, yeah, I agree with you on that, Brandon. There was another article that I sent you guys on the Stats Significance site, written by Daniel Paris. And what he did is he pulled a bunch of stats together around horror to give us an idea of the appeal of the horror genre relative to other genres. And so I thought this was really wonderful. So it's overwhelmingly quantitative. But one of the things he pointed out was that horror is the most divisive genre. And here's what he meant by this. So what they did is they took a number of different genres and they ranked them on a 5-point Likert scale. And they would take the responses of folks who indicated, the appeal of that particular genre for them. So a 5-point Likert scale, which means that there were 5 category answers. So they were love, like, not sure, dislike, hate. So it gradually goes from the extreme of love all the way to the extreme of hate. So 5 points total. 79% loved or liked action. And then it goes down from there to not sure, dislike, hate. So 21% wound up in those latter 3 categories. For comedy, it was 41-45. That's 86% total that loved or liked comedy. And then 14% were in the not sure, dislike, hate group. For horror, though, the love like was 49%. That was the love like. And the dislike hate was about the same. It was 45%. Okay, so horror is more like a seesaw. You can think of it as like a seesaw where you have, equal numbers at each end. But action and comedy, that's not the case. We're not as polar opposite. So that's why he says horror is divisive.
Mm.
Well, I want to add in just another factor I think that's in there. I think a decent amount of people view the horror genre as heavily misogynistic, and especially the further back you go, a lot of horror movies were kind of appealing to this idea of just like, women being chased and terrorized and tortured kind of. And so there's a heavy amount of that, especially like, the kind of cheaper B movie types of stuff, like the kind of further down you go into horror, there's just a lot of that, that kind of twisted imagery. And I think so a lot of people feel like the genre is kind of rooted in, it has these very misogynistic undertones. Maybe not even undertones, just
yeah, that's fair.
But it's so that's a lot of people. I think a lot of people's association with horror movies, and also of course, it's become a running joke over the years that a lot of them will have one black character that they'll kill off in the first, and he's the first one to die basically, and he usually does something stupid, to end up dead. And so I think. The view that it's not all that diverse of a genre, and that it's kind of preying on these, this misogynistic imagery that, that can appeal to what they view as, sexually frustrated men or men that are that just get this kick out of seeing women be terrified, basically. So. That's another. It's just another factor in terms of why the genre is as polarizing as it is.
Chris, when you bring up the sexual component of this, don't forget also that usually the virgin always survived, and it was usually the floozy or the loose girl that was always targeted. So kind of again to your point of misogyny, most of these done by men. It was probably some subconscious thought of like they couldn't get that girl, and so they made sure that she was the one that was off, whereas the more pristine character had the chance to survive.
And she was always stupid and had no survival instincts, and like they joked in Scream, with running up the steps instead of out the front door and stuff like that. So,
you also brought up the racial component to it, and it's a well-known joke about that with horror movies, is that when you're the minority character, you're not going to survive. But I had to take a quick look, because when you brought it up, it reminded me, I don't think there was, and maybe you can remind me of this, was there even a black character in Scream? Because I'm looking at the cast list right now, and I don't see one on there whatsoever.
I don't believe there was in the first one.
Yeah.
Which is quite crazy for me, because Scream, for myself, like, we grew up knowing about Halloween and Friday the 13th and all of those, but Scream was my generation's like Halloween style horror film that came out and has had several sequels. And so it's interesting because I had to think back, and I'm like, actually, I don't remember seeing anybody that looked like me in that first one. So interesting that it's still stuck with me this long.
It's interesting you bring up the misogynist component to this. The demographics indicate that an equal number of men and women like horror movies. As a matter of fact, it's 1 point higher for women.
Really?
Yes. The other surprise, too, is that the horror is quite appealing to people in the 35 to 44 age group. I would think it would have been, 20, maybe in 20 to 35. Also, since the movies are emotionally charged, they are considered to be good date movies. You know, the girl will draw closer to the guy because she's afraid, so they're considered good date movies. This is all in the research. This is not me speculating, by the way. It's all good. You'll never find out. I'm not going to. Never find out. One of the things brought up in Daniel's article were some moviegoer types that Colton Scrivener, who is a researcher at the University of Chicago, developed of moviegoers who particularly like movies in the horror genre. And one of them, there's three of them. One is called the adrenaline junkie. It says they like suspense. They like being scared. And so this particular group tends to immerse themselves more in the experience. They lean into that experience more. New horror movies out, gotta go see it. Those would be the adrenaline junkies. Another would be the white knuckler, who is stressed by, that would be me, who is stressed by horror films, what they see on screen, and they're often afraid afterwards. I think a lot, I told you all about my experiences with Jaws, and similar experiences with Rosemary's Baby, similar experiences with watching The Exorcist, and of course, similar experiences with watching The Ring. I would be considered a white knuckler. I am stressed by what is shown and what is dramatized in horror films. And then the last is called a dark coper. And they use scary movies, he says, to deal with anxiety, to satisfy curiosity, and to provide a sense of comfort and to remind them about the violent side of humanity. And in this sense, he kind of overlaps with Yang and Zhang's research regarding satisfying curiosity about the dark side of human psyche. And so I found that interesting, and I'm not sure how you guys feel about those three types.
Probably the white knuckler will be me then.
Yeah,
I think I gotta go adrenaline junkie just because it's at least a somewhat common term. Like dark coper, it just seems so. It's adding so much. It's like too much psychology almost for me. It's just like. I don't think it's that deep. Like I don't view it as like I don't view it as that big of a decision. Like, oh, I gotta this is gotta, you know, I gotta go see 28 Years Later, you know, my anxiety and all. Like it's just too I don't know. So I guess in the you know, Dad, I saw this movie a long time ago called I think The Perfect Score, and there's a character in there who's it's about these kids who try to steal the answers to the SATs, and this one of the kids in the movie is just like a stoner, and this one of the other character goes, "Why do you smoke pot?" And he just goes, "Something to do." This is and I feel like when somebody asks me about horror movies, it's like something to watch, I guess. Like I don't think there's all these psychological layers as to why I'm going to see this horror movie. So I guess adrenaline junkie is the one I would choose of those three.
Okay.
Thank you, Chris. I think you articulated way better how I felt. That I don't think when it comes to horror movies, especially, I feel like it's more impulsive than it is like extra layered. You either like it or you don't, or if something appeals, like, ooh, gotta go.
Yeah, I don't think that, to Chris's point, that it's that much of a conscious decision. But I do think that it's interesting that both sets of researchers kind of have that in common.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say what I appreciate about the first one versus the second one is that the second one pretty much puts things in buckets, and the other one says that you might have parts of each of these elements. And I kind of lean more towards that because I feel that I would probably throw myself in the junkie category. But there are these, like I was explaining earlier, these things about delving into the dark side that some horror movies draw you into that. And I can kind of see that as being part of it. So I don't see it as being 1, 2, or 3. It might be a blend of all of that attracts you with a certain horror movie.
I think.
And you may not know that beforehand. I'm saying this as part of the experience. Again, to Chris's point, before going to see a movie, I don't analyze it to the point of going, yeah, got to get that dark side fixed. But part of the experience of the movie might delve into that, and you might find that, interesting.
I think about the answer to a question, why do you watch that? Why do you want to watch that? And the response is because I like it, or because it seems like there has to be a better response to that. And that's what I am searching for. And the reason I am searching for that is because it's something that does not appeal to me. It is something that I find incredibly stressful and frightening. And so and yet, a son who came out of my body finds it incredibly appealing. My husband, who I'm very close to, finds it incredibly appealing. And so I'm trying to understand the disconnect. What is this? What's in that? I need an explanation for that space. But it looks like I'll have to continue to. This research is just the beginning of something for me. And I was hoping that perhaps you guys could share light on that and tell me if you think it's BS or it doesn't fit or.
Well, I question the research a little bit, but I think one thing I found interesting that it talked about was just that, the role of empathy. People who feel a stronger sense of empathy are less likely, I think, to enjoy horror movies.
Right.
And so, I think in real life anyway that I'm an empathetic person.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm watching a horror movie, I am rooting for the person to make it out. So I don't think it necessarily ruins, but I guess I do have that, I do have a sense of detachment and acknowledging that it's it isn't real. I remember earlier this year though, I saw one called, Bring Her Back, which is, it essentially is this movie about this foster mother who's trying to bring her biological daughter back from the dead. And I think it could have, I think it did decent, but it could have done better. It's just, in that movie, just like very bad things are happening to kids. And I think it hurt the movie's marketability in a sense, just because it was such a downer movie from that standpoint. And
careful. Just take the fruit, Ollie. Okay, I'm gonna get you a plate. Oh, Laura, yelling at me. Making a mess.
Ollie! Hey, Ollie!
I remember leaving the theater and definitely feeling a little down from where I usually did when I would watch horror movies. So I think there is something to that role of empathy or turning off empathy or not feeling it in general. But yeah, I guess most of the time as I'm watching the movie, I'm not necessarily, maybe I'm just not that invested in the characters. I want them to make it out, but I have a little bit of detachment in terms of like understanding I'm not watching something real, I guess.
And it doesn't linger at all for you, at least. Well, obviously this one did. Bring Her Back did.
Yeah.
But typically it doesn't, like something like The Ring or Storm of the Century, which is something I've talked about quite a bit.
Yeah, it's like, I think, it's kind of like, I think there's just a level of thrill seeking or just enjoying the thrill. Like there's a lot of people who I feel like just, a lot of people get on roller coasters, and they enjoy getting scared by them, or they don't like heights, but they'll make an exception for roller coasters. So yeah, I don't know what it is. I think it's just the momentary adrenaline rush you get out of it.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, I like horror movies for everything that you said, and I won't say that they haven't bothered me after viewing them. The Exorcist stuck with me a long time. It was a very creepy movie. I can say a number of horror movies that I've seen have had an effect on me, a lingering effect. But, eventually I get over that. Occasionally they do come back. But to answer your question of trying to understand why we like those, part of it is that thrill, the adrenaline and all that, the stimulation from it. But then again, at some point you kind of pull back from that. And I thought Chris's description of roller coaster rides was a good one. I mean, why do people go on roller coaster rides? Yeah, it's kind of that thrill, that adrenaline that you get, the rush from it. And then afterwards, it's gone.
Yeah, I hear you. That's also really short-lived compared to watching a movie. The interesting thing is you guys did use terms that these researchers used. Adrenaline rush, detachment, stimulation, which says that there are some kernels of truth to what they're saying. I mean, it does, not everything necessarily.
Also, one thing, and we brought this up on our horror versus thriller podcast, Tintin listeners. There's a supernatural element to horror movies, and there's the way they usually build that universe where it feels very removed from reality. It feels just a little apart from things. There's usually some sort of supernatural element going on. And I feel like that allows for just kind of, the momentary thrill. It is fleeting in a sense, just because when the credits roll, that universe suddenly kind of drifts away. And because when we talk about being scared, I'm like, is that really limited to horror movies? Die Hard sure as hell seems like a scary scenario to be in to me.
Yeah.
There's plenty of non-scary movies where I'm like, that looks pretty terrifying. That looks like a pretty terrifying situation to find yourself in. So,
like snakes on a plane.
Well, yes.
That's a true horror movie to me.
Snakes on it anywhere. But yeah, so I think there is a level of like, there's supernaturalism that kind of makes it allows for a little bit of distance in that sense. Maybe that's part where the detachment comes from.
Okay. That adds some clarity for me. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Cup of Tea Critiques podcast. Honestly, we could go on and on like we do at our dinner table, but we appreciate you figuring out your cup of tea along with us. Make sure you rate and follow us wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Also, leave a comment and tell us why you like to be scared. You can stay in the loop on all things COTC by subscribing on our website at cupofteacritiques.com. You can also find us on Facebook, check out our Instagram at Cup of Tea Critiques, and on Letterboxd at COT Critiques. For Reba, Terry, and Chris, I'm Brandon. We'll see you next week for another deep look with a deep brew.